My mother's father was born in 1894. Grandpa Steggy was the oldest of 7 children. So when his parents could no longer afford a coachman, care of the family's horses fell to him at the age of 6 in the year 1900. Horses were transportation then, not recreation. Even living in New York City, my grandpa wouldn't see his first automobile until he was in his 20s. In my 20s, in May of 1992, when Grandpa was 98 years old, I sat on his bed in a small rural hospital in eastern Ohio. My mom had taken a break to play with my kids in the grassy courtyard. Grandpa had been asleep for several days, and we figured it wouldn't be long. I held his hand, a hand that just a few days before had been hoeing in the garden. Straightening up, he had cursed his arthritis yet again and issued his very familiar tagline, "Johnny, don't ever get old." He never did quite catch on to the whole JD thing. So I sat on the side of his bed just looking at this quiet, peaceful old man with his Dagwood haircut. And I don't know if I said it aloud or just in my head, but I said, "Grandpa, you can go whenever you're ready." As though in response, the pauses between his breaths got longer and longer, until the pauses were far longer than the breaths. Within about 10 minutes, that last one more breath never came. It was beautiful. At his memorial service, I never cried. I cry in Disney movies, graduations, sermons, children's books, you name it, but not at Grandpa's service. I thought there must be something wrong with me because I was the only one not weeping. It took me years to realize that maybe those last peaceful moments with him had been a bigger gift than I realized, offering a chance at a different relationship with death. Today, I am especially remembering Aaron Winborn and Amy Winans. A year ago, I was spending much of my free time planning and organizing the memorial service for Aaron, my dear friend and colleague. Aaron was in the not-to-be-envied position of being able to plan the exact date of his departure. It's one of the few perks that comes with life on a ventilator after descending alive and well into the hell that is ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. There are times, not hypothetical at all, when death bestows a multitude of blessings, both on the dying and those who remain. Aaron's memorial service was held on March 28th here at Clover Lane, as had long been planned, and was made beautiful by the concerted efforts of many friends. It was a fair and fitting send-off for a man who had endured the unendurable. And I'm proud of my part in his service. But I have one major regret, that I was not able to be present at Market Street to say goodbye to Amy Winans that same afternoon. Amy's death was sudden, traumatic, and with her passing, death did not bestow a multitude of blessings. It was devastating to many in this church community. Death is a thief. It steals away those we love with no right of return and no redress of grievances. Who wants to be friends with a thief, especially one so capricious and disloyal, who rips our hearts out time after time after time? I do. The Hebrew book of Genesis says, "From dust were ye made, and dust ye shall be." By now you know that we are literally made of stardust. Most of the atoms that make up the stuff in this room, including our bodies, were created in the blast furnace of an exploding supernova star about 7 billion years ago. Before the explosion, only light elements like hydrogen and helium. After the explosion, a dead star, and the surrounding space filled with precious heavy dust that gravity slowly collected into all this. On the day that star died, was death a thief or a midwife? Carl Sagan said, "The secrets of evolution are time and death." There was another day in the late Cretaceous period, a truly dark day, probably a Monday, when on that day, death arrived here as a large asteroid. That was a sucky day to be a dinosaur. It wasn't exactly a good day for anyone on the planet, but for our mammalian ancestors, it turned out to be Independence Day, a birthday, Christmas and New Year's Eve all in one, a huge gift, beautifully gift-wrapped in the smell of settling dust and rotting meat. None of us would be here this morning. This building wouldn't be here. The incredible creative processes of the tertiary period would never have happened if the dinosaurs had not made way for us by dying. So on that day, was death a thief or a midwife? My grandpa Steggy worked in his day's equivalent of Silicon Valley. Electricity, motors, and generators, new high-tech replacements for whale oil, horses, and manpower. My grandpa installed the first high-pressure steam turbines at Sing Sing Prison, turbines which powered the now infamous electric chair. He later served as chief engineer on the dredge that built Tangier Island in Chesapeake Bay. Rough work with rough men in rough conditions. My grandfather had a different rude name for every ethnicity in Europe. He had only one rude name for all the ethnicities of Africa, and one more for those of Asia. My grandpa would actually say stuff like, "You know, Johnny, some Italians are good workers, but you can never trust them. They'll bite you when you're not looking, just like that dog over there." This good, hardworking man was no more racist than his contemporaries, but that's not saying much. As well as I loved him and still do, as glad as I am that we have photographs of him holding my young children, I'm also glad he wasn't around for their formative years, passing on stereotypes and prejudices. So, was my grandfather stolen from me, or was his passing a gift given by him to his great-grandchildren, and the hope they represented even to him for a better future? I was talking about that with my daughter a few weeks ago, and she said, "Yeah, Dad, just imagine if pre-Civil War plantation owners were still around running for the Senate." Yeah, just like you, we laughed about how that's exactly what we have. But of course, things are better. And it's partly because dinosaurs of all kinds have their day and then die. I'm a dinosaur. This is my day. My day will end. Maybe this afternoon, maybe 50 years from now, but it will end. I can hear evolution's call for my death already in my struggle to get the pronouns right for my transgender, is it my niece or my nephew, the was or the is? I see it in my indignant arguments against veganism and the implicit bias of my entire generation when it comes to race and gender. It shows up in my driving when I could bike and using the dryer when we have a clothesline right there. You see, at every stage of evolutionary creativity, from the Big Bang right through the next election and beyond, death and loss are inextricably linked to birth and creation. Yes, death is a thief, but also a midwife. He takes and gives with the same hands. My life is a gift only made possible by the deaths of stars, of dinosaurs, of deep ancestors, grandparents, and the dead animals and plants I ate for breakfast this morning. It's a gift I will pay forward by getting my spoiled 20th century butt out of the way of 22nd century progress, whether I like it or not. Mind you, I'm not in any hurry. It's a darn good thing death is inevitable, because I'd probably never choose it except under duress. Duress that I hope to avoid if I can. Aaron and Amy weren't so lucky, and maybe I won't be either. Death does not owe me an easy ride. Our cultural metaphors warn us about death as a hooded figure, stealthily approaching, coming for us. I'm learning to think about it the other way around. Death is already here, inside every seed, every warm spring day, every birth, inside every pregnant moment, waiting with loving arms for me. I walk towards death, inexorably, inevitably. My only choice is whether to walk with my back to it, fearful and closed, or to turn and embrace death with open arms, saying, "Welcome, thief. Welcome, friend. I'm ready. I'm ready to share forward what you gave me so that others, new others, may live and breathe and create a better world after me." Yeah, that all sounds nice, and I'm sincere in it. But it doesn't patch up the holes left by people I love who were stolen away. Thanks to folks like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, we now know that grief has many faces and that all of them are okay and healthy, even mine. We know that those holes don't ever really get filled. Life never goes back to normal. I still hear my grandfather's voice every time I strip a wire or use his tools, and I wish he could see my children now. I see glimpses of Aaron and his young children every day at school, and I wish he could see how they're growing up. I think of Amy every Sunday, whether Tony's here in church or not. The holes they left never get filled, and everything is different without them. Death is a disloyal, cheating, greedy thief. We can befriend him or not, but we can never unfriend him. Death and life are an old married couple, inseparable, and together they do horrible, wonderful things. Today and every day, when we remember those taken, let us celebrate their lives, mourn their deaths, and let our remembering and our tears be a gift to ourselves, to one another, and to those who come after. Amen.